Dry January ended January 2nd.
All right. Welcome everybody to
There's some seats up here.
tasting number 146 of the Saratoga Whiskey Club. We have some people joining us right now. I'm sorry if someone's in here. That's okay. All right, here we go. We are really excited about tonight. We are, Rebecca, I have you up here next to me. We are really excited to welcome Jared Hart from Impex.
Hello, everybody.
He'll explain what Impex is and their portfolio as well. And we're going to get to taste some really great whiskeys from newer distilleries, some classic, a little bit of everything. Some of these are really fun places to visit as well. So when you go to Scotland, you need to go to Lochlea and Wolfburn and all of these great places. So yeah, so we're going to actually do 6 whiskeys tonight. We have some of these available too for purchase. Just so you know ahead of time, the Adelphi Benriach 10, there's only one, and the Kilchoman single cask, there's only one available, but the other 4 we do have a number of bottles. So if you're interested in any of those, you can buy them after the tasting or use your phone and snag them before they're gone. Yeah, so let's go ahead and welcome Jared to this tasting, and he's going to walk us through. For those people online, I know the screen is a little hard to see. You're just going to have to pretend you can see it, and we have about 10 people online right now. So there we go. So thank you, Jared.
Yeah, thank you.
Up here.
It's important. So thanks everyone for coming. It's not too warm out there, but I guess you guys are used to it up in this part of New York. So for those of you that don't know, so I work for Impex. I am not the New York, New Jersey guy. Gershom is recently hired. He is our newest hire. So he's in charge of New York and New Jersey. I figured I'd have him up here and let him meet everybody and kind of meet him myself. And we're going to do a lot of drinking when we get back to the hotel tonight. So, so I cover mainly the Mid-Atlantic. I also cover Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Arkansas, along with Delaware, Maryland, DC, Virginia, and South Carolina. Through people who love whiskey, I happened to get put in contact with Holly and, you know, was invited up here. It just so happened that our New York person had moved on to another job. So I was like, absolutely, let's do it. I would love to come up. I was born and raised in Jamestown, so I'm a Western New York guy. But anytime I can make it back to New York, I try to get there. So we import mainly whiskeys from around the world. We've got a couple rums, couple gins, some mezcal that we do. But when we started out as a company, Impex was strictly a whiskey import company. Our first brand was Isle of Skye blended Scotch, and then we branched out from there. We've now got, I believe, 21 distilleries under the umbrella, maybe a couple more that I'm forgetting. A lot of Scotch, but we also represent Milk and Honey out of Israel, Pocono in New Zealand, Indri, which is Piccadilly Distillery out of India, Penderyn out of Wales, Filey Bay in England. So we've got distilleries all over the planet. And as Holly was talking earlier, some of the New World stuff is really great, but it's always nice for me when we can taste a Scotch lineup. So you guys are in luck today. We have all Scottish single malts here to taste for you. And we'll go through. I always like to do a little responsible drinking. Those of you at home can ignore this. So we've got 6 whiskeys. 1, 2, 3. We'll say 3 of them are pretty high in proof. So we're all going to be feeling good by the end of the night, but we'll be okay to get home. If you go out afterwards and something happens, remember that's on you. My responsibility, our responsibility ends when you guys take off. So with that being said, let's get right into our first whiskeys. So I printed a nice sheet for you guys. Take notes, keep them, write on them, throw them away, whatever you want to do. There's usually one mistake on them. I think I actually got this right this time. So we are going to start with Wolfburn. Is anybody familiar with Wolfburn? Had it before. They've been around for a few years now. They've had a couple of different importers.
Not that way.
Really fun distillery. And I've been to most of these distilleries. So if you guys notice, I didn't bring my squirt gun here tonight. So this is how we drink on the beach. It's not how we drink tonight. I just like to throw some fun stuff in there. But here's all of Wolfburn. So you guys can see what a massive distillery this is. Couple warehouses in their operations building. So not very big. They are the northernmost distillery on the mainland of Scotland. So they are way up in Thurso. And again, it's not the most beautiful, 200-year-old building you're going to see, but they make great whiskey. There's the warehouses, and that's the important part. So the Aurora you're having now, is this the 750 still? Yep. So the 750s you're having, it is 2/3 matured in first and second fill ex-bourbon barrels, and 1/3 matured in Oloroso sherry. Then after their maturations, they're married together for the final bottling. And if you guys have any questions, the funnel's in the back. Let me know. You got to do a funnel before we start answering questions. And then there's one more. This guy's in all my tastings. He's one of my best friends. So again, I'll call it fairly new to the US. It's probably no more than 5 or 6 years that we've been seeing this. The distillery itself is almost 200 years old. It kind of went away for 100 some years, and then it's now been rebuilt, revived. It's in the same area, but it's not the same distillery. And you guys can see how far north we are here with this distillery. So almost up into Orkney. What do you guys think? Nice way to start the evening. So here's a picture of the old distillery and some of the guys that work there. I like comic books, if you guys couldn't tell. There's going to be nothing to read. It's just all pictures. There's no charts, no graphs, no exam, just a bunch of pictures and stuff. So
we did this bottle 2 months ago at our tasting downtown,
Okay.
Henry Street Tap Room, and it was a real hit. It's a great starter whiskey. Easy.
yeah, well, that's why I
Delicious.
wanted to do this even before the Lochlea, because the Wolfburn stuff is definitely like a great way to start. It's easy drinking.
I was thinking the late skip, that's why I put Lochlea first.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So who owns Wolfburn? It's the South.
I believe so. I haven't met the owners yet. It's not a big corporately owned distillery, but it's
Yeah, for like Scottish guys.
I'll look it up.
Maybe you're thinking of Bladnoch with the yogurt guy?
Bladnoch, they're definitely Australian, man. So again, here's the entire facility. So if any of you end up going there on your way to Highland Park, it's pretty much the only reason you're going to be up that far. Maybe Pulteney. It's not much to see, but it's a beautiful area of the country. This is probably my favorite thing about the distillery. They've got this amazing wolf sculpture of metal out in front of the distillery that's really awesome and mean looking. So it's one of the cool parts about going to visit there. So they've got this is funny to me. So here's their entire production facility, so you guys can see it. So you've got all your mash tuns, washbacks, your stills, your condensers, all in this one big building. Very clean, very industrial looking. And then they've got this huge bay door that just opens and closes, and the spirit safe is like right in front of it, which is kind of cool. On a hot day, you open it up and you can get some airflow through there. On the cold days, you could freeze to death if it's not closed. You guys notice their stills though, fairly narrow, fairly tall and thin. Again, gonna help produce a very light floral style of single malt. But there's not a whole lot to it, and as they grow, I'm sure they will expand, but it's a really nice, quaint little distillery at the moment.
Do they have two different products that they make with the two different?
No, so the stills, we'll get into that a little bit later. They're always done in pairs. So as you know, your single malts are double distilled. They'll go through the wash still first, spirit still second. The wash still is always bigger than the spirit still. And the spirit still, you'll generally see the refractor bulb in there to help get a little more oiliness and some refraction going when it's distilling. But any distillery you go to that's making single malt generally will have them paired off. There's some that do weird things like Mortlock, where it's like 3 stills, but they kind of all work together. But generally, yeah, there's going to be 2 stills. They'll be paired off. If a distillery's got 3 sets, they're going to be paired in sets of 2. I don't know that I've ever seen a distillery with an odd number of stills in it. So
There's a couple, just lack of expansion plans.
didn't have
and-
space.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and again, I mentioned it, but you'll notice, so the wash still is always bigger. You guys don't get 100% transfer of liquid from one distillation to the next. The water stays as the alcohol evaporates and is cooled back down. So, and these are not very large stills, 5,500 liters for the wash and 3,000 for the spirit. So they're fairly small. They don't run 7 days a week. They don't run 24 hours a day. They still close up at night and go home. Traditional, like family style, privately owned distiller. So you'll notice a pattern there with most of our distilleries that we have.
The line on the spirit still is much flatter. than
Yes.
the wash.
Yes.
Just do more contact or-
It is more contact. It's slower contact actually. But with this, the more extreme your line arm is pointing down, then the more that it's going to help pull some of those vapors out. So it's actually making it more efficient as well. They're pulling a little more compared to if this was flat or angled up. They'll get a little bit more liquid out of there from condensation because it's helped pulling it down a little bit. But you are correct. There's definitely, this is 90 degrees and this one is sharply angled down. I think it's 90. It looks close to it. And then very traditional warehousing, new buildings, but dirt floors, traditional dunnage, 3 casks high, that's it. No palletizing, no giant warehouse racks. And yeah, they're just, they've been filling it up since 2013 and they're doing pretty good with it. So does anybody not enjoy that? I started drinking Wolfburn on the golf course a lot, late fall. It's a really nice, like warmer weather, kind of chill out and relax. You don't have to get too into it. So I told you there's no tests, no quizzes, just so you guys know, this is all the casks that they make to put whiskey and other things into. If you've never seen a diagram of them, it's pretty cool to see from your octaves all the way up to the tons.
So you said no diagram.
It's a picture. It's a picture. You don't have to read the words. How's that?
So, age and ABV.
So officially no age. I told you they started filling casks in 2013. So I can tell you, just released was a 10-year-old that just hit the US. So we'll be seeing that out hitting the market soon. These are most likely 5 to 8 years old, the cask going into this. But there's no specific age. There could be some 3-year-old, there could be some 2013 casks. It really all depends when they marry the cask for the batch, what they have available and what's working. ABV, they're, at least to my knowledge, they're all 46%. Everything you have tonight, natural color, no chill filtration. We'll talk about that later as well. And it's really cool to see all 6 whiskeys next to each other, the difference in color that you've got there with them. So now with our whiskeys, these are the 3 main casks that we're going to see. So you've got your ASB, your ex-bourbon barrel, 200 liters. I know everybody knows bourbon. Probably everybody in here drinks bourbon. You got your hogshead in the middle, which is wine barrels. before bourbon. Remember, bourbon hasn't been around as long as Scotch and single malt has over in Europe. So they would use anything they could. The only rule is 3 years in oak. So they would use a lot of wine barrels, port, sherry, whatever they could get their hands on. And then all the way over at the end is your big sherry butts, Spanish oak. So how many bourbon drinkers we got in here? Probably quite a few. So the barrels can be used once. They got to be brand new, freshly charred. And then what do you do with them? Well, we'll sell them to somebody else because we can't use them again. So they're fairly inexpensive. I think nowadays, even with inflation and stuff, I think we're looking at maybe $80 for an ex-bourbon barrel for these distillers to get to fill up in the warehouses. How many sherry drinkers do we have? Besides me, good sherry is a great thing. And if you like whiskey aged in sherry casks, you should all be drinking more sherry. There's not enough casks out there. Sherry consumption has gone off a cliff. So the sherry casks can be used as long as they want. They can be used as many times as they want. The good sherry bodegas will look to use them 20, 30 years, even longer than that, to really make great sherry. So those sherry butts are on a good day, 12 to 1,500 bucks to get to fill your spirit into. So keep that in mind as you guys are drinking. Everyone, please drink a little more sherry. Try to keep this cask price down so we can put our single malts into it. It's good Wolfburn. I'm joining you guys as well. I can literally almost see the hotel from here. So. Do we have any questions on Wolfburn? Comments? Oh, that boy, that shirt's fantastic. You leave it. That's perfect. So this is a fun photo. I mentioned how nice it is when you can go to a tasting and all the glasses are out there with all the whiskeys pre-poured. One, it smells great, but two, everything you're having is natural color. I mean, nothing. It's just like wine. You don't squeeze a grape and red juice comes out. You don't distill barley or rye or wheat or corn and get a colored liquid. So for me, I always like things natural color. Color does not imply quality. All it will tell you in this case is what type of cask things were aged in. So this is all the same juice. It's all the same age from the same stills, the exception of the first bottle. The only difference is what type of casks they were in. So you've got some ex-bourbon, some sherry, some port. It just there's a lot of people, I know you guys have probably been taught, well, don't pick up a whiskey and go, oh, look how dark it is. That's great. I'm going to love it. Because if you don't like stuff in sherry or port casks, you're probably not going to enjoy it. Color really will tell you a lot about how it's been aged, but it doesn't imply quality. So just keep that in mind. Darker doesn't always mean better. Now, if you like sherry casks and you go pick up a nice Adelphi bottle that looks like motor oil that's aged in sherry, you know you're really going to enjoy it. So one other thing I always like to talk about. So a lot of distilleries, most distilleries now, did you ever go to the cooperage when you were over there? Speyside? Yeah. So this is a really crazy part of the process nobody thinks about. So all these bourbon barrels and these other casks coming in from around the world, they're getting broken down, crammed into a container, and then these poor coopers in Scotland have to put them all back together. It's not an easy job, and go interview 1,000 kids in Scotland. Nobody's going to say, I want to be a cooper when I grow up. You want to be an athlete or a firefighter or a police officer, whatever it may be. Nobody grows up wanting to be a cooper unless grandpa did it, dad did it, and it's kind of been passed down through generations. Takes a long time to learn the trade to where you can do it successfully. I mean, you've got a pile of staves and some hoops, and then you've got to put them all together and turn it into something that's going to hold liquid. So big pain in the ass. Almost all the distilleries in Scotland anyways are buying casks from the cooperage. There are a few like Kilchoman and a couple others who have direct contracts with distilleries where they get their barrels direct from the distillery. They'll ship them wet, which means they'll leave a couple liters in there to slosh around as it goes across the ocean. they'll get to the distillery, they'll open them up, take a quick nose, make sure they're okay, and then they'll be filled. So costs a little more money, you're shipping a lot of space and emptiness in your container, but once you take a cask apart, you're never putting the same cask back together. So just something to keep in mind. There are a few distilleries that do not use the cooperage because they feel like they get a better quality cask directly from the distilleries. And most of them use Buffalo Trace, if you didn't know that. So most of the direct contracts I've heard of, I know Lochlea uses Maker's Mark, which we'll talk about later, exclusively. Kilchoman was using Buffalo Trace exclusively. They've started to deal with some other distilleries now because Buffalo Trace has told all their contracts they won't be renewed when they run out. So they're going to have to find a new source for bourbon barrels, but the cooperage is always there. Here's one of those sherry butts, so you can all see how big they are. There's a bourbon barrel. Imagine 2.5 of those. So they're really large casks. And then, of course, when they're new, they get fired up. Anybody know why? You can yell it out. It's fine. Absolutely. Yep. Yep. And a lot of people think that.
To repeat that, just so those people.
Yeah, so it's caramelizing the wood sugars, getting the vanillas, the toffees, the caramels, all those great flavors out of the American oak or whatever oak it may be. A lot of people think that they char it to help seal it, which it does a little bit, but not really. The main idea is they want to open the pores of the wood, and by charring it, the carbon will help filter the spirit a little bit as it's in there. But also, most importantly, it allows the liquid to go deeper into the wood and pull more flavor out. So almost always charred when they're new. I don't know anybody that's used uncharred oak. There's been some virgin oak stuff done, but those are charred as well. And in Scotland, they'll use the casks once, twice, 3 times even for single malts. After that, if they're going to continue to use them, they will most likely be scraped down and recharred. To try to reopen some of those pores. The more you use wood, the less flavor it puts into the spirit that goes in there. So after most of your single malts, probably first fill, there's some second fill, not much third fill, and then anything after that generally ends up like in a blended scotch or a blended whiskey of some sort. And just to give you an idea, there's the outside of the cooperage. So they've got plenty of casks to fill up for everybody. I think it's time for our next whiskey. And y'all don't have to wait for me on the whiskeys. Feel free to go at your own pace. Just know that you might be out of whiskey before we're done with our comic book here. So, has anyone had Lochlea before? This is one of my favorite new distilleries. So we were just there last fall, and it is a former, guess we'll call it wasn't a dairy farm, it was a meat farm. So it was owned by Robert Burns' father for a while, back in the 1700s.
You're saying slaughterhouse?
Yeah, pretty much. They didn't do it on site, but it was a cattle farm. Lots of land, lots of cattle and livestock. Robert Burns and his brother lived there, helped Dad on the farm, again, back in the 1700s. This time of year, for the last couple of years, everybody wants Lochlea because Burns Night is coming up. And it makes the perfect story for a great evening. A few years ago, the distiller, more than a few years ago now, it's been, I think, 2016. So it's a gentleman who did fairly well for himself as an entrepreneur, thought he wanted to slow down and become a farmer. So he purchased the farm, he fixed up the old farmhouse, he's living there with his wife and his kids. And he realized that he hated cows unless they were already medium rare on his plate. So what does he do? He's got this giant farm with all this land that he just bought. So he sells off most of the livestock and the cattle and plants barley in the fields. So Lochlea is a farm distillery. They only make whiskey from barley grown on site in their fields. They don't get their malt from anywhere else. It's a few shots of some of their fields. They've got quite a bit of land. So when we were there, unfortunately, it was the fall. There was nothing growing but some cover crops. For those of you that know a gentleman named John Campbell, spent almost 30 years at Lefroy. He retired a few years ago. He's now been the last 3 years as the master blender for Lochlea. So probably from about this point on, anything you taste has to get his say-so before it hits the bottle and comes out to market. They do have an entire production team. They work together, but he has the final say-so. And when we were visiting, he took us out in this field, and it's a little bit windy. It wasn't too cold, and we're all like, what are we doing? So he's like, oh, well, I wanted to show you. If you guys look at the bottle, we have a bottle somewhere. If you guys look at the bottle, it looks like a half a pint, like a 200 milliliter, but it's not. I'll pass it around. There's actually some tractor marks that are like embossed in the glass on there. It's meant to kind of mimic the tractor marks around the field as they're farming. So we walk down to this little gate here, and he just stops, and there's like a dozen of us, and we're like, what's he doing? Did he forget something? He's like, what's that over there? And walks over to a pile of rocks and pulls out a bottle of whiskey and a bunch of glasses, and we all stood and had a nice whiskey out in the field. So it was really nice touch. So
Everybody made it back.
yep, everybody made it back. Well, none of us were driving. Joshua had to drive. So yeah, I think 11 distilleries in 10 days, 10 distilleries in 11 days, all over. So the name Lochlea is the name of the farm. If you can see this little brown patch here, that actually is Lochlea. It used to have water and hold water. That's why the farm was put there. It's now dried up, but they still have some of the cattle. That's about all that's left there. So a couple of my coworkers wanted to pet one, so they went over, and every single cow in the field came right over there, and we're just hanging out. So that's, you met Kevin, right? So there's Kevin, and that's Melissa there. Very animal friendly. So here's the grain shed. So this is all their barley. Just kind of hangs out in there until they need it. They'll take it. They now have 2 malting floors, I believe. They've malted half a dozen to a dozen batches of barley so far. So when they first started, because they're way far, if you look at your map, they're pretty far south in England, or in Scotland rather. They're just over the border. They were trucking the barley down to the maltsters in England, and then just having it sent right back up the road to them. But now, because John Campbell's there, people like myself and all you other Iowa whiskey lovers are all bugging them to do peated whiskey. So they put a malting floor in. And I think they have a second malting floor now as well. But this is it. When they use this barley up, they're done. So it's never going to be a huge. So they released the plowing edition early this year.
Okay. I have that.
It came and went, but it'll be the 4th seasonal release for them.
Okay.
It'll be like early every year, January,
What
February.
PPM or level of peat smoke is that?
So it's not, I don't know. It's definitely peaty, but it's mainland peat. It's not Iowa peat. So you don't get the heavy iodine and medicinal qualities to it. You get more like spicy, grassy kind of notes to it. Yeah, but it's pretty heavily peated. Yeah, I don't know the exact ppm measurements, but anyone you give it to is going to know there's peat in there as soon as they smell it. So yeah, if there's, oops, sorry, how'd that get on there? Kind of falling behind the tour a little bit. So yeah, fun story. So as I'm doing Barley Angels, I run out to catch up, and the barley's just stuck to me everywhere. Keep in mind, that's all the barley they got. If this tastes a little funny, it might be that batch. But so I'm like wiping all this barley off me, and the owner comes around. He's standing behind me, just watching me. And I have no clue he's back there. I like take my shoe off, and I'm shaking barley out of it. And he comes over next to me. He's like, "Did you get it all?" And I'm like, "I think so." And he like bent down and started like sweeping it all in a pile. It's like, "This is all I got, man." I was like, "So sorry." And he's like, "I'm just messing with you. Don't worry about it." So it was funny. I was scared for like half a second that he was going to get mad about it, but he was a good sport.
Keep your
I've
mouth
also
shut.
done that at Kilchoman as well, so it's kind of my thing. So here's the distillery. Hey, you haven't lived
Last
until
tour.
you've rolled around in some
We've
malting
done
barley.
barley. Yeah, we're right there.
So it's not a very big facility. To the right of this is actually the farmhouse where they live. These are all ex-bourbon barrels waiting to be filled. And then the stills are right inside this nice big glass wall here. Very small operation. This is actually 2 photos. Notice the wooden washbacks, which I think is really cool. So most places you're going to see stainless steel. A lot of people say the wood adds more character. Little more expensive, little more maintenance, but it does a little more work for your spirit when it's getting ready to go into the stills.
And this one is
Our barley.
46%.
Yep. So
Non-age statement.
no age statement. I can tell you it's probably 3 to 5 years old, because the distillery hasn't been around longer than that.
Jared, could you explain and maybe you will, their seasonal releases? Because at the shop, we actually started with their sowing,
Which was their first
Ex-bourbon.
one, yeah.
and then the fallow, which is all sherry, and then the Our Barley came out, and this is my favorite, which is the everything.
Yeah, it's the one you can always buy.
Yeah.
Yep.
and this
So,
is-
Here's those casks I was telling you, and again, it's kind of cool, but it's kind of great marketing. And we're, of course, when we're at the distillery, we're like, how come only Maker's Mark? And it's like, oh, well, Lefroy, John Campbell was there for almost 30 years, same parent company as Maker's Mark, so it's pretty easy to get their casks. Come to find out, I think he's the sales director or something. One of the other head guys was actually the global cask broker for Beam Suntory. So he sold all of Beam's casks and traded them all around the world. So they said it works best with the spirit. It does work very well with the spirit. But I think there's some corporate connections in play there as to why they're using Maker's Mark, solely Maker's Mark. So it does work very well. Warehouse wise, they've got a little combination warehouse. So it's traditional dunnage as well as some larger racks to hold some of the bigger casks. So seasonal releases, here we go. So what you're having now, Our Barley, always available 365 days a year. Aging wise, it's ex-bourbon, it's sherry, and it's STR. Does everybody know what STR casks? No? So it's a kind of way to rejuvenate the casks. They're getting red wine casks, but they don't want pink whiskey. They don't want the tannins from the grape skins in the spirit to give it that flavor. And really all they want is the cask. They don't want it to be like a red wine aged. So what they'll do is they'll shave down a few millimeters from the inside of the staves, get all the residue from the wine out, and then they'll rechar it. So it's almost like a new cask, but it's been used. So it's becoming more and more popular. If you guys have heard of Dr. Jim Swan, who passed away a few years ago now, he was consultant at Kilchoman, at Penderyn, at Cotswolds, at probably about a dozen New World distilleries, Milk and Honey. He was kind of the guy. If you were starting a distillery and you really didn't know what to do or wanted help, he was the guy you called. And it was one of his things where he felt it worked really well with younger spirit and with spirits that were being made in New World countries. So generally, if you see anything that's labeled as STR, Dr. Swan somehow was involved in their early days as a consultant.
After they shave it, do they rechar or no?
Yep,
So
absolutely.
they shave
Yeah,
it and then rechar.
shave it down to get down to the exposed like raw wood and then rechar it. Yep, and it has almost no, to me, it has almost no wine qualities in it. You can't see the color. You don't taste berries or fruit from the wine that was in there. It's really just a way to get more of those caramels and vanillins out of the oak.
That's the STR, the shave.
Shave,
toasted
toast, rechar.
So if that's the case, if that's the case, there were you're not getting really anything from the wine. Why are they using wine barrels?
Because they're basically neutral in the sense of the wineries, and they're
Okay.
fairly inexpensive to get your hands on.
Okay,
So
that makes sense.
there's a good supply of them. They're not expensive like sherry casks.
Yeah.
So it's a readily available source of cask for them to use.
Totally makes sense.
I just checked our information, the Plowing Edition there's no PPM because it's not peated technically, it's made in peated casks.
There you go.
It gets smoky finish from the cask itself. So
And I'm guessing they're Lefroy casks.
Okay.
Yep.
Maybe,
But-
maybe repeat that on the.
Yeah, so if you didn't hear that, the plowing edition, the peated. So this is perfect time to go through them. So the first release, there's 4 seasons of the year. There's 4 seasonal releases from Lochlea. Springtime, as you said, their first seasonal release was sowing edition, coincides with sowing of the fields. It's going to be the one all the way to the right there. It's like a lightish blue turquoise color, 100% ex-maker's mark barrels for aging, and 46% no coloring, no chill filtering. Then after the sowing edition will come the harvest edition. So after you sow the fields, your barley grows. It's generally like early fall that they'll harvest the barley. And that is the reddish orange one. It always changes. So the first year it was port, sherry, and STR. This year, I believe it was just sherry and STR. I don't know if they did port. It changed a little bit from last year to this year. What you're going to get now is the fallow edition, which just landed in the US. That's the dark purple. And as you can tell from the color, the first year, 100% sherry matured. Second year, this year, 100% sherry matured, PX and Oloroso both. So that's always like winter time, early winter, midwinter. And then plowing edition is their final release of every season, and that comes out winter time, and that's their peated whiskey. So they are going to do some maltings, I believe, of their own, but for now it's all aged in ex-Isla casks.
What's the outrun for these?
It's not very big. You saw how much barley they have. I'm gonna say for the US, we probably get a few hundred cases, 200 to 300 cases maybe for the country. So figure 2,000 bottles on the higher end, we'll get of them. So it's not something that you should have to like go hunting and search for. Should be readily available. It's just short windows that they come.
Yeah, so the Lochlea Our Barley is $65.99, so also very reasonable, which is really great. And just for reference, the Wolfburn before was $75.99, so both also very reasonable for what they are. But yeah, just to give you a price point.
Yep. The seasonal releases are only a couple dollars more as well. They're not much difference in price. And some of those are bottled at 50%. They're not all bottled at 46.
When you were talking about Dr. Swan and STR, did you actually say that Israel is considered New World?
In the whiskey
Is
producing
that-
world, yes,
That's New World?
it is. Yes, New World. All these New World distilleries, as they're called. The countries aren't new, but their history of distilling is new. So they fall into the New World category of whiskeys. You've got Wales, which is not a new country, but you know, Penderyn was the first distillery in 100 some years in the country that was making whiskey. So
If it's on this wall.
there we go. All your non-traditional whiskey producing countries. But yeah, so we represent quite a few of them. And Dr. Swan, before he passed, that was kind of his specialty. So really quick, this is a fun thing I like showing. Feel free to get on to the next whiskey if you guys like. Next up is going to be the Teaninich, which if you don't know, is anybody, I'm sure you guys have had Teaninich before. Some of you, anybody?
Probably not many.
No? Okay, cool. So this is one of those distilleries that is owned by a little company called Diageo. And it's one of the 4 main malt distilleries that feeds the Johnny Walker brand. So there is a flora and fauna release that's released in the UK only. That's, what's the age on the Teaninich that they release over there? 10 years or something? But you can only buy it in the UK, and they don't sell single malt anywhere else. So if you do happen to have some Teaninich, it's gonna come from one of these independent bottlers. So as we're talking about distills real quick here, and I show you guys all these fun pictures of all these, they're always paired off. Like I said, some places have 2, some have 20. Everybody knows who has the smallest stills in Scotland, right? Nope, they may be smallest production. So Macallan has the smallest stills, but they've got like 40 of them. So they can still make a decent amount of single malt. Here's Glenmorangie, if you guys haven't seen them, the tallest ones in the country. Very tall, very narrow. Just remember these when you're thinking of spirit. The more copper contact, the lighter, the fruitier style of whiskey that's going to come out in the end. So whenever you see these really tall, really narrow stills, they're going to be producing a light, fruity, floral style of single malt. Is little short, fat ones. So all different shapes, all different sizes. The fun part is it's copper, and as we heat it, we're burning it out. So a lot of people don't realize that these things get replaced somehow. So you can tell here that there's actually some pieces that have been put on that are newer than others. So I think I was told somewhere, depending how hard you run them and how often you use them, 20, 30 years before you gotta invest in a whole bunch more copper to put the new stills in. You can see here, they're a little bit older, a little dusty on the bottom. This is actually some right before they were replaced, not quite as romantic as all the other photos you saw of the distilleries, but that's what happens to them. As you use them, they burn up. So, and then here you can see them actually lifting one out that they're gonna do some work on and replace some stuff on. So, very expensive procedure. And if you guys notice, a lot of the distilleries, when you go to them, they'll have these big, beautiful like walls of glass. And the stills there, it's not so you guys can see the stills, that's how they get them in and out. It's nice that you can see them and it's great aesthetics for the distillery, but the main reason that there's always glass there by the stills, they take the wall of glass out to move the stills in and out. It's the easiest way. It's easier than taking the roof off. So, this is our first cask strength whiskey of the day. 59.1%. Is everyone in here familiar with Adelphi? They've been around quite a while as an independent bottler. Only been in the States for like a year now. I think we've had them. So fairly new to the US. I heard you guys are Ardnamurchan fans up here. So Ardnamurchan is actually Adelphi is their parent company. So Adelphi has now been bottling whiskeys for 30 years. Last year was their 30th anniversary. And as casks started drying up, as whiskey became popular again, they started looking long-term and decided that building a distillery was the way to go. So they are the same people own Alex Bruce and his partners that own Adelphi are also the owners of Ardnamurchan Distillery. So cool little tie-in there. They do still bottle the Adelphi stuff. And if you guys don't know, a lot of it they made their reputation on really heavily sherried whiskeys. I call them motor oil whiskeys. They look really dark when you see them in the bottle. But this is one of my favorite unknown distilleries. I really like Teaninich. If you have it in ex-bourbon, I always get a lot of like crisp green apple notes in the whiskeys. Just a really fun Speyside single malt to enjoy. This one obviously is in a sherry cask. If you didn't know that, what do you guys think of that one? Yeah,
It's still bright though. Still
It
has a
is.
nice crisp brightness even with the sherry.
I think it's a refill.
It
It
says
should.
versatile or the
Okay.
sherry concept.
But that apple crisp is there.
Yep. I'm gonna need glasses soon to try to keep
Yeah.
reading the type on that. Bottles are so small. So we'll get probably 2 to 3 drops of Adelphi that come in throughout the year. As single casks, Impex distributes now to 48 states. So you can imagine one cask coming in and getting fairly split up between all of us that fight over getting bottles of it.
288 bottles, that's it.
That's good.
So divide that by 48 states. Granted, some states get more than others. You guys are in the lucky position that you got a little city south of here that drinks a lot. So there's a decent amount that comes into New York State for everybody. So probably one of the largest other than California and maybe Texas.
Per capita, we were recently ranked
Yeah.
number one.
Yeah.
This one is what, 115?
Yeah.
115.99 for 12 year. It's
Yep.
actually a really great price for a 12-year sherry.
So this is a fun thing. So a couple filling stations. Another thing a lot of people don't realize, well, they don't think about it. So they don't think about the cask, coming from the US, how they get there, all that. Most distilleries don't bottle their own whiskey either, if you did not know that. So the majority of distilleries will call up a bottling hall. There's a few really large ones in Scotland, and they'll say, hey, we've got X amount of liters that we need bottled. And the guy at the bottling hall will be like, okay, we've got room, send your truck down on such and such a date at this time to drop off your liquid, and we'll get it bottled for you. Sometimes it takes months to get stuff bottled. So a lot of your smaller distilleries now are putting in their own little bottling lines. And some have been doing it for a long time. Edgedower bottling line, that's where they do all the signatory stuff. Kilchoman bottles their own stuff. Adelphi, I think, gets done at Ardnamurchan, but I'm not 100% positive on that because I haven't been to the distillery yet. That's one that we missed when we were there last year. But then from there, we're going to go into the warehouses, and this is something that we're seeing more and more of. I don't know, have you been over there lately? There's a lot of palletized warehouses going up. And it's fun to talk about. A lot of people like to argue about it. It's like the casks are standing up, they must age differently than when they're laying down, right? Makes sense. The heads are going to dry out quicker because they're not totally full. So as you stand them up, the top of the head is going to dry out a little quicker. It's going to let some more air in. However, you can fit a ton of casks in your warehouse when you do this. And in Scotland, unlike Kentucky, the warehouses age very, very consistently throughout. So
One of the things I saw when I was there this September or August was they have multi-floors at Ardnamurchan. So
okay,
even when you go up top, you have a different climate than when you're down
so
below.
those may be the first
So-
ones I know of that are multi-floor then.
Yeah.
Because usually, even if it's a giant tall warehouse, it's still just
I
one.
know, yeah, so they
One
have
floor.
actually a big staircase you go up and then they have a whole top floor.
Nice.
Yeah,
Did you pick one out while you were there?
I pretended.
Nice, nice. Can we try that one? So just something that's becoming more common as distillers are growing and getting bigger. The blending warehouses are all like this. So, I mean, they don't really care. However, we're drinking a single cask. Like, what if we want to see how this one's doing?
Yeah, it's trickier to get a sample or a taste on it.
It's way trickier. It's like two
There's a
forklifts,
pallet on top.
two forklifts and like 6 guys, and a week later you can get your samples
There's a couple
out.
thousand pounds above that.
So this is traditional as we know it in Scotland. 3 casks high. I've actually seen some warehouses doing 4 high, which is pretty dangerous with all the weight on the bottom. You can crack and leak pretty easily. So traditionally you'll see 3 casks high. And then again, you're starting to see some of this as well. I know Tamdu is a big one. So super easy to get the casks out. If you need to pull a sample, check how it's doing. Also, this goes to the ceiling, so you can fit a ton of casks in there. The Glenelg warehouses are the same way. So just some different styles of aging. Some have good positive notes. Some people say like this, they're like, why are you doing that? It's not aging right. It's aging the same way as everything else. It's just standing up instead of laying down. So as you can see, they can take a lot more
There's a
weight.
lot more pressure on those bungs too.
There
Pop the
is
bung out, you get, 35
Yeah.
gallons of whiskey in your face.
projectile bungs.
Projectile whiskey at this, 2
So,
inches across.
yeah, but this, I mean, this stuff, they know what it's aging like. It's gonna go into a regular bottling. This stuff is not ever intended to go into a single cask or something like that, so. And then this is the hard part of the job, is finding those single casks. Yeah, Pendarren, so that's Bethan, she's one of the ladies at Pendarren. St. Anthony Wills when we were at Kilchoman. So there's James jumping around like a spider monkey, popping open casks for us. So this is the hardest part of the job, guys, because I mean, look how hard they're working. You want this job? Those guys just turned 25. That's how hard this job is. So everybody's enjoying their Adelphi. I think we're ready for the next one if you guys want to get there. So I'm a big fan, and I know a lot of people who aren't the biggest fans of Teaninich. I don't know why personally. I think the single malt that comes out of there is amazing, and I love tasting it when it comes around in bottling.
That and Del Ewan,
It's my favorite, one of my top 10 distilleries. So Del Ewan and Sherry Cask, I go absolutely bonkers for. Yeah, I have like 3 bottles at the house. Like I absolutely love that stuff. So as we move on to the
Really good.
really quickly, if you guys don't know what chill filtering is, it's not rocket science. It's cooling whiskey down. So it's pretty easy. You'll hear that a lot. No coloring, no chill filtering. So this is chill filtering. They dump the whiskey in a tank. They cool it down to like 32 degrees. And what happens, does anyone in here drink their whiskey on the rocks? You can admit it. There's absolutely nothing wrong. As long as you don't use tap water to make your ice, I won't complain. However, they'll cool it down. So if you guys ever have whiskey or have a friend who has whiskey on the rocks and they kind of set it down, the ice melts. If that ABV goes below 90 proof and it hasn't been chill filtered, it might develop a little cloudiness or a little haze to it. Same thing if you add a little too much water, you put a splash of water in your whiskey and you get it down below that 90 proof. It takes time, maybe 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes. I usually fall asleep on the couch watching TV and I wake up and there's a cloudy whiskey there. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. But as consumers, if we see a cloudy whiskey, we're going to think something's wrong with it. So they developed this process so that the whiskey always stays nice and clear and doesn't develop a haze or a cloudiness. Now, the issue that some people would say, so there's your filter after you get done filtering it. So when you cool it down, a lot of the oils and fats and the esters that are in the whiskey will solidify and will get pulled out into this filter. So does anybody in here cut the fat off their steak before they cook it? No, you don't.
No, I have. I made that mistake.
Yeah. Do you take the bone out of your T-bone before you throw it on the grill?
I messed that one up.
No. So the fats are where the flavor's at, right? So if we're filtering out a lot of the fats, are we also filtering out texture or flavor out of the whiskey as well? So fun question. The 3 highest selling single malts in the US are all chill filtered and all use caramel coloring. It's totally legal. You can see why they need coloring because you strip all the color out as well. So the people that chill filter say that caramel coloring is odorless and flavorless, and the chill filtering doesn't change the flavor of the whiskey at all. It's still the same. The people that don't chill filter say, hey, you're pulling out fats and oils out of the whiskey, which definitely have flavor. So you're definitely changing it. For me, the biggest thing I notice is the texture. There's almost more of a texture in whiskeys that have not been chill filtered, viscosity almost. But again, it's a big thing. Nowadays, you'll see most distilleries leaning towards not chill filtering and leaving the whiskey in more of a natural state. It's also why you see 46% is kind of the new benchmark ABV because it's above that 90 proof and they can not chill filter it and it'll still not get hazy and cloudy.
Just in our own defense,
Mhm.
my wife is perfectly justified cutting the fat off the meat because we figure we're getting so much fat from the non-chill filtered whiskey. We need to balance it.
You just go vegan or something. I mean, that's fine. That makes sense though. I get it. So again, sherry, Benriach. I'm sure you guys have had Benriach before. This is a distillery that gets sold official bottlings from the distillery. They've actually just rebranded and there's quite a bit of it now in the market. I'm seeing it a lot more often than I used to. So I guess it's a Speyside distillery, but they're also one of the few who do peated spirit. So Benriach has peated and unpeated, both that they do, which for a Speyside distillery is not super common. And again, this was a sherry cask that we got from them. This is even higher ABV. I think this is about 59.9. So we're getting up into that. We can run our lawnmower on it if we run out of gasoline.
So Pedro Jimenez, first fill.
There you go, first fill PX. So I haven't had it in a while. I forget how it tastes, but I'm sure it's delicious.
Adelphi bring all their casks to the same location. Their own warehouse in a specific place, or they leave them at distilleries and take them when they want.
So that's a good question, and it kind of goes for all the independent bottlers. Is the casks generally are not going to sit at the distillery that they're distilled at. They're going to be, a lot of them actually are traded back and forth between blenders, and there's cask brokers who have warehouses that store them.
They sit tight and they're bought and sold.
They may never move, and they may have 3 different owners.
Right.
Yeah, it's just selling them. Now, a lot of times they're even bought blind. We used to do a brand called Exclusive Malts. David had some of the best casks. And he was telling me the one day when he was in the market working, he's like, oh man, it's like, I gotta go taste 50 casks when I get home. And I'm like, oh, that must suck. He's like, well, I just paid for them all. And I'm like, you don't get to taste the cask before you buy it? He's like, with the brokers, when stuff comes up, they're not gonna pull 50 little samples and send them to me. So a lot of times, that's why you'll see different finishes, or you'll see things put into different barrels and aged longer. A lot of times, they're not quite up to the level of the bottler, so they'll take them out of bourbon, put them into sherry, or they'll do something with them. They'll let them age longer. He even told me a few times he's opened the casks up and they're empty. Just bought an empty cask and there's nothing you can do about it. So yeah, the bottlers generally don't have like full access to their casks until they already own them, and then they can go in and draw samples from them.
And just so you know, on this one, there's only 1 bottle available. It's the same price as the Teaninich, the $115.99. Just FYI. Well, Bottle kill.
There we go. So I gotta ask, because I'm curious, out of the 2 Adelphis, who prefers the Teaninich? Wow, okay. Benriach, just a few, about even, all right. You can only vote once too when I take votes, guys. Just so you know, you have 2 hands, you only have 1 vote.
I'll just tell you from a shop standpoint and also a lover of independent bottlings. Whenever I'm traveling in Scotland, I'm always wanting to try Adelphi bottlings. I mean, it's so rare that we get them here in the US, and when we get them, they're gone. They're literally, they sell so quickly. So just these are special bottles. We just don't see a lot of Adelphi things here in the US, and they're definitely sought after when you're traveling. Even in Japan, if you see Adelphi, older Adelphi bottlings, it's fantastic. Some of the whiskeys that they've been able to grab
Yeah.
are out of this world.
Well, 30 years they just celebrated, so you
Yeah.
can imagine
Right.
30 years ago, there really wasn't people like all of us. There wasn't a whole lot of groups that sat down and tasted whiskeys and explored whiskeys and wanted new stuff. So these bottlers that were large enough that bought a lot of casks have casks sitting around that are absolutely amazing whiskeys because they've been doing it for so long. They were buying things like Springbank when you could actually buy them. They were buying things like Macallan when you could actually buy them. Nowadays, they just don't come around. And if they do, the price is so outrageous that you don't even want to buy it.
I'm surprised at how cheap these are actually compared to like Blackadder or some of the other independent ballers that we like. This is very well priced.
Oh yeah, very reasonably priced.
Very reasonable.
The only really two expensive ones I've seen, we did a 21-year-old Springbank in a rum cask. And then we still have a little bit left of Bunnahabhain. Yeah, 24-year-old or something. That's not bad. Not bad. It's one of those casks that was picked out because of its uniqueness.
Is it peated or unpeated?
It's unpeated, but you would not guess it was Bunnahabhain by tasting it. It's one of those ones where the bottlers are either looking for great examples of the distillery or something that's totally the opposite. So this one is totally the opposite. Oh yeah, there's not many bad Bunnahabhains out there. So speaking of exclusive malts, this is David in action when he was bottling back in the day. Little shop vac and filling bottles by hand. So here's more of what you're going to see, those smaller bottling lines I was telling you guys about. So this is actually Kilchoman's first one where they do all of their single casks and small batches from now. They put in a second one that's slightly larger and more automated. So there's only like 3 people instead of every step. I mean, this poor lady filling up, 4 bottles at a time, take the hoses out, slide them down, 4 more. It's definitely not something easy, but it keeps everything on site. There's Penderyn. So I almost got strangled. I almost walked in there. So we're touring the warehouse. This is right in one of their aging warehouses. And there's all these big plastic heavy duty strips hanging down. And I wasn't even going to go in there, but I wanted to take this picture and see it. So I opened the plastic, and Beth, the young lady you saw there, just stopped talking to everybody and was like, "Don't go in there." She yelled from where the windows are. And I'm like, okay. So you can eat off the floor in here. When they go into bottle whiskey, full white hazmat, booties on the shoes, hairnets, everything. It's just like a kitchen. So they keep it absolutely sterile, super clean so that they can bottle their whiskey in there. And then here's the big bottling halls. You're not going to get a single cask that goes to a bottling hall and gets bottled. It's all going to have to be done by one of these smaller independent distilleries that has their own bottling facility or bottling line. Benriach is nice. It's definitely PX too. Yeah. All right. So for the record, does anybody in here make beer? Gotta have a couple brewers, right? So making single malt is the exact same thing, only after you make your beer, you double distill it. So it all starts out with barley. So they'll take the barley, they'll fill these tubs with barley, fill it with cold water, they'll let it sit for a couple days, or they'll fill bins like this. They'll drain the water out, they'll refill it, they'll do that 2 or 3 times so the barley gets nice and wet. The barley now thinks it's been planted in the ground, so it will start to grow. The only problem is it will use all the moisture as it grows, and we need to stop that. So this is where our floor maltings come in. I think there's now 15 distilleries in Scotland out of 160 or so that are doing their own floor maltings. Only one distillery malts all their own barley. That's Springbank, if you guys didn't know. So everyone else either buys some malt or is malting a percentage of their barley, but not all of it, or some do none. So we've got all this barley, it'll come out, get dumped on the floor. The new guy gets to rake it all, so it's nice and even. After they get done, here's what you got, bunch of wet barley sitting out there. It'll sit out on the floor like 3 to 5 days, depending on the time of year. As it's sitting there, it will dry out. At Kilchoman and your malting floors at the distilleries, the barley's probably about this deep. It's not super deep. Port Ellen and your commercial malting facilities, it's all automated. They'll have like 5-6 feet of barley out on the floor and just have things that turn it. Here, this poor guy gets to drag his spade through there every 12 hours. It'll dry evenly. Most importantly, it'll prevent carpeting. So if you think all this little barley as it's wet, it's starting to grow. These little sprouts are what we need to get all of our good stuff to turn into alcohol. If you don't rake the barley every 10 to 12 hours, those sprouts actually intertwine, grow together. It looks like a Rice Krispie treat. You can see. So not a fun job, but it's something that's necessary in order to have a malting floor. And actually, once this happens, it's no good. You can't use it to make whiskey from.
Just get a bunch of barley angel makers in there to do it for free. People like Jared go in and lay down and start breaking up the carpet.
They could. I would actually love to do that. It would take a while. So after 3 to 5 days, the barley's dried out quite a bit. It's almost dry enough that we can grind it up and start going into fermentation. These poor guys, and this is Kilchoman. This is a fun one. So it takes 3 guys 4 hours to empty the malting floor at Kilchoman. It's done with shovels and wheelbarrows. It all goes to the corner to this little conveyor, dumped down this little square here, and is piped up into the kiln. Does anyone know why it takes 3 guys 4 hours? It's a fun one. Anthony Wills has 3 sons, and when they started the distillery, the sons had to do, the family did all the work. They didn't really have employees, so they all did all the jobs. So when it's time to clear the malting floor, it was the 3 boys' job, and I'm guessing they weren't the hardest workers because it was Dad's distillery. So 4 hours to unload the floor with wheelbarrows.
One is.
So barley goes down, barley goes up. If you guys have never seen the inside of a kiln without barley in it, here you go. So this is the ceiling with a little fan, which will help pull the heat and the smoke up from down below. This is actually the floor where the barley sits. You can see like a steel girder. That's generally how deep the barley is when they fill it up. Yes, I've done angels in this one as well. And then this is the floor. So if you want to know how the smoke gets in there, comes right up through these little holes in the floor. So barley gets pumped up. Oh, is everyone on Kilchoman?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice. So this was their first fully matured MPX release from the distillery that's not a single cask. So they did a release in 2021. It was a finish. It wasn't fully matured. This one fully matured. There was just under 2,000 bottles, I believe, in the US. 1980. That was a good year. So as they light the fire down there, it's, for me, the greatest smell in the world is when peat's burning. I don't know of anything that smells better. Doesn't smolder, doesn't smoke, or doesn't smolder, does smolder and smoke, doesn't catch fire, turn into flames. So they'll start it with coal and then they'll just load all this peat on there. And it's just this big, if you've ever dumped water on a campfire at the end of the night, when all that smoke comes up, imagine that, but it doesn't stop. So the smoke goes up, gets into the kiln. You can see the barley sitting there. The more peat you burn, the longer you leave it sitting there, the peatier your whiskey technically. So this is where they measure your ppms, if you guys didn't know that, which is why you can have things like Octomore, if you guys are familiar, that are 150 plus ppms, but don't taste like chewing on a piece of dirt. So they measure the barley as it comes out of the kiln or off the malting floor. And it's always higher because you can adjust that. You can do longer fermentations. You can do different cuts off the still to kind of adjust the ppms that are in the actual flavor that's in the whiskey. So there's things you can do, but that's where the measurement is. For those that are wondering if peat's running out, my answer is no. So this is Kilchoman. It's actually right across the street from the distillery. The guy that lives there works at the distillery. He's their peat cutter. One pass down this, it's about 60 yards. One pass down this bank is enough peat to run Kilchoman for a year for whiskey production. Yeah.
You brought it up, so I'll be nerdy. You said that the cuts you make off the still will affect the amount of peat that's in the final liquid.
Flavor wise, not actual measurement. Yes.
Because that means the density. At what point does the peat come off? Not with the hearts.
It's reversed. So at the beginning of distillation. Yeah, the question was, how do you adjust the flavor of the peatiness after the barley's been malted and everything else? And so one, longer fermentation times. The longer you ferment, the more fruit esters and notes you get. And the less of that, especially on Isla, the medicinal, the iodine stuff will kind of blow off. Distilling wise, the heads are where all your fruits and floral aromas and flavors are coming from. So if you move at Kilchoman, the heart cut is slightly forward compared to other distilleries. So they take a little more of the heads to bring a little more fruit and aromatics, and they take less of the tails. The tails are where you get the heavy medicinal quality from the peat. So it's still just as peaty, but if you take a little more heads and a little less tails, it doesn't taste as peaty. So ppm measurements are kind of deceiving because there are ways you can manipulate the actual flavor, even though the ppms may be very high. Octomore is the perfect example of that.
Is the ppm from like each individual piece of barley or the overall content in the burn?
That's a good question. I have no. How do they test the ppms? He asked if it was like the individual barley or if they just take like a big chunk of it and test
That's a
it.
big hot debate because Octomore measures at the barley level. And a lot of people are starting to say you should measure at the
Liquid level.
bottling level because you will actually lose parts per million over age. If you taste a really old peated whiskey, sometimes you can barely tell it's peated.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit of a controversy. So the parts per million will actually evolve as it's maturing. But most people measure at the barley still. They'll send it off for testing and they can actually get the phenol count in the actual grain.
They don't want to send their whiskey off though,
No.
because they're not going to get it
But
back.
a knock, if you're a knock Dew fan, a knock, they'll have like 17.2. They have very random ppm levels and they're very proud because it's measured at bottling.
Could we just send them a petition, say, we don't care when it's barley? We
Yeah.
care in the bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, and that's been deceiving for years because you've got, especially on Isla, you've got Ardbeg, Lefroy, and Kilchoman. If you think of those three distilleries, they're all peated technically at 50 parts per million. They're all the same peat levels, but Lefroy has that heavy iodine, Ardbeg has that nice dry ashy quality, and Kilchoman's probably in flavor the lightest peated of all. Three of them in flavor. Technically, the barley Ardbeg and Kilchoman use are exactly the same. They both come from Port Ellen maltings. They're both malted to 50 parts per million. It's the same batch of barley. It's just going to two different distilleries. And you can see how different the end product is when it comes out. So back to Pete. He's a good guy. So wet peat and dry peat. So there's literally baskets sitting outside at Kilchoman. As you can see, it's a little darker, hasn't been there as long. They call that the wet peat. And then here's the drier peat that's been sitting out in the sun. It will lighten up in color a little bit. Just dead earth. If you guys don't know, they'll dig down about 1.5 feet. The fun thing that I saw when we were there digging, if you notice down in the pit, I call it, where you can tell that they've dug these rows. What they do, they'll dig the top piece off, and he'll actually jump down and put it nice and neat. So this is actually the top row of the previous row that was dug. And they'll just put it down there so it can continue to, turn into peat over the next couple hundred years with time and pressure. So, but yeah, this is 1 year's worth of peat at Kilchoman, is probably about a 24-inch strip right down there. So not bad at all. Yeah, it is. It's
200 years of.
it's not super sustainable, but there's enough peat and it will continue to regenerate. So, well, so last I read, like 90% of all the peat that's used in Scotland is still not making whiskey.
Oh.
So there's still quite a bit that's used. On Isla, like you get a plot of land where you can go dig your peat from. And we saw people like out in the field digging peat on Isla for their
There's a lot of
house.
gardening, big,
Yeah,
But I
it's,
think it's being pretty heavily regulated.
it is,
on the-
but there's still commercial peat companies in Scotland. If you guys want to know a fun trick, if you see a brick of peat and it's square, it was dug by hand. If it's round, it was dug by a machine. I learned that when we were there in 2019 because we were at a distillery and there was peat, and I'm like, why isn't that square? And they're like, oh, machine dug it. Yep. And they'll just let it sit out in the field and dry, which is the fun thing. Driving around Iowa, you look in the field and there's just piles of peat everywhere that's drying out. It's pretty cool. So here's Kilchoman. If you guys haven't had the PX, now's a good time. So this is my favorite distillery. It's probably the reason I worked for Impex. When it started coming into the country, I started following them. Really love their whiskeys. Just like Lochlea, they're a farm. So they've got a little over 200 acres planted of barley every year. They're actually a working farm as well. They've got sheep, cows, chickens. So they have agricultural as well as animal farm here. They own, I think, like 600 acres or something, but a lot of it's unplantable for barley. So that's where the farm animals are. So here's a little overhead shot. And you can see all the different barley fields. And you can go online. They'll actually tell you, because they'll switch varietals of barley a lot of years. They'll tell you like what type of barley is growing in each field. It's pretty fun to follow along and watch. For those of you that follow Kilchoman, if you like the Loch Gorm release they do, that's all sherry. That's Loch Gorm right across the street. It's where they draw a good chunk of their water from. Sometimes it's really high, sometimes it's really low, but it's super dark. Like it looks almost black in color when you look at it from the road. So some more, if you look way to the right up in the top there, so that's the Kilchoman Church, which is pretty fun. I got to go there before they fenced it all off and stopped cutting it. So here's their two best customers wandering up. Anybody been to Isla before? So my favorite thing is there's no fences on Isla and the sheep just go where they want. And you look at the sheep and everyone has a little dot on the back of their head in spray paint. Some are green, some are red, some are blue. That's how they tell whose sheep are whose. So it's like you call your neighbor. It's like, hey, I got some of your sheep down here. Come grab them.
Apparently sheepdogs are good at rounding up sheep, but they don't care what color paint it is.
They're colorblind. Yeah.
That's why the sheep lined up in different places.
Yep.
The dogs were insistent.
So we were just kind of touring the church and the fields and stuff, and there's just sheep walking around. Nobody bothers them. They just kind of wander and do what they want. They obviously are kept out of the barley fields, but if you want to know, last year at the livestock sale, Kilchoman sheep fetched the highest price of any sheep on Isla. It's because they're eating the spent draft from the distillery. So, big combine. So this was last fall when we went. They were supposed to be harvesting, which would have been really cool. However, it's Isla, the weather sucks, it rained. You'll notice how the heads of the barley are kind of bent over. It's what happens when they get too wet. So the combine will kind of smush them down and miss it. And once the barley hits the ground, it's no good. You can't harvest it, you can't use it. So they had to wait a couple of days to let the barley dry out a little bit before harvesting and let the heads kind of pop back up on them. So it's kind of fun to see. And here's Mockyer Bay for you Kilchoman fans. It's the sandiest, most delicious beach on Isla.
Is there an age on the PX?
There is no age on it. Knowing Kilchoman, it's probably all between 5 and 8 years old. Most of their standard releases are 5, 6, 7, 8 years at this point.
Okay.
More on the 5, 6, 7 year part.
Okay.
But yeah, they don't really release age on. Oh, you know what? This one definitely does have an age on it.
It's behind you there.
No, it's on the website.
Oh, okay.
It'll tell you that it was however many barrels filled this year. So it will tell you. But they don't really put ages on anything other than single casks. So. And you guys can see those sheep running around. So when we went here the first time, this is up on a hill. I thought it was a golf course. And I'm like, can we go play golf? It's like naturally hilly. It looks like a golf course and it's just the way the land is. But beautiful beach. All right. Oops. So for a lot of you, this may be, it wasn't me. This may be the oldest Kilchoman you've ever had. So this is a 12-year-old single cask aged in ex-bourbon. It is absolutely delicious. I tasted a little bit before we started. And for me personally, Kilchoman and ex-bourbon barrels is where it's at. So the ABV on this one is 54.6. If you guys want to know a little more about ABV, pretty much standard industry right now. Everything goes in the cask at 63.5. And generally at Kilchoman, they'll lose about 1% a year. Some years more, some less. So just a little math for you. Nothing ever comes off the stills at 63.5. It's always higher than that. So they're actually proofing it down, most distilleries, before it goes in the cask. That used to go in 70, even higher than 70. I've seen some old Cadenheads bottlings that were like high 60s%. I'm like, how'd they even get that high? So they used to put whiskey into the cask as it came off the still. Nowadays, they'll dilute it all down to 63.5.
Still
for the most part.
Considerably for 12 years.
Yeah, about
54.
1% a year is what they tell us on average. So this was a little less than 1% a year.
Okay.
So yeah, you gotta think about that. If you want a 30-year-old Kilchoman, you might want to put it in the cask at a slightly higher level because you're going to be losing ABV.
Now, is that an Isla or a Kilchoman warehouse issue? Or?
No, it's cold and damp and pretty crappy. So as the Angels take their share, they're taking the alcohol because the atmosphere is already wet and saturated. So it's just the way it is in Scotland for the most part. Yeah, like Kentucky's hot and dry, so the Angels will take the water, not the ABV, and so the ABV will increase in hot climates where it decreases in others. I've seen milk and honey bottles, cask samples that are 67, 68% go in the cask at 63, so they're going up as well. So what do we all think? Yeah,
PX was my favorite.
was it? All right, we'll do that at the end. We'll figure out everybody's favorites. Really quickly, so there's now 2 sets of stills at Kilchoman. This is the original set. Second set is exactly the same. What I want you guys to notice here is the notebook and the pen sitting there. So there is no automation on this set of stills. Everything's still logged by hand as they're running, the temperatures, the times, the ABVs. So very traditional in style. Standard warehouses. They did just put in a palletized warehouse, but there's nothing in it yet as of last September when I was there. And again, 3 casks high. You guys will notice they use blue. So you see a blue cask head at Kilchoman. It's a first fill, 50 ppm spirit. If you see, I don't know if you can see any here. They'll have some with white heads. If you see a white head on a cask, it's their 100% Islay spirit. And then if you see a white head with a blue circle, it's a first fill 100% Islay cask. So it's kind of fun. I asked one of the guys in the warehouses, they gave us a free hour, like as my boss was meeting with Anthony Wills to discuss things. They're like, all right, guys, you got about an hour, hour and a half. Have fun. Everyone else in our company opened their laptops, started working. I filled my glass up, started wandering around the distillery.
Barley Angels.
Yep, Barley Angels. I hiked up the hill behind the distillery, took some photos.
Pull out your drill.
No, I did not. I did not.
Putty and drill, right?
I did offer to run the forklift as I had a full Glencairn of whiskey, and the guy was like, probably not a good idea. But yeah, wandered around the malting floor, just was talking with the guys working there. It was pretty cool. And all the poor suckers that worked with me were on their computers sending emails. Sorry, is this being recorded?
Yeah.
One other really cool thing on Islay. So this is the World War I memorial. There's a ship went down, 100 people lost their lives. There were some Americans there. All but one of the Americans has been returned. They're leaving one there. This is taken care of by the people on Islay. It is an amazing, really cool sight to go see. The grass is better than like a Major League Baseball field or professional golf course. It's always immaculately kept, and the people on Islay do that just out of their volunteer work to kind of keep the memory there. And yeah, it crashed, like the ship went down right off the coast of Islay. A lot of people didn't make it. A couple of them did. They ended up on the shore and were saved by the Iliacs. So that's a really cool thing if you get to Kilchoman. It's out by the water. It's not in any of the fields that are like, so did you go to the church too?
Yeah.
So it's past the church and like farther, like James took us in the Land Rover, like through the field to get there. There wasn't a road that went there.
We're
so.
going to the beach.
Yes, Moncure Bay.
I'll bring my suit.
I've been there.
I had a picture of it up. There you go. That's where you're gonna be.
We'll be there.
What's the water temp?
We're gonna have a dram on the beach.
The water temp is wetsuit all year long.
It's like Soprano.
You can dip your toes in, but I wouldn't want to go in much farther than that. So, and then here's the church. So it's super old. This is actually where Kilchoman gets its name from. It doesn't look like this anymore. They stopped kind of, when I was there last year, it's all fenced off now because the church is still falling apart. They didn't mow between gravestones and things. As you can see, there's no roof on it, but super old church. It's where the distillery gets its name. There's the distillery from the church. And that's all their land with barley that's planted once a year. So really cool place. This is the Kilchoman cross. You'll see it on a lot of their stuff. I searched this out intentionally, almost got killed by a sheep. So I did. So there's this really mean, angry sheep right there, this little baby. And so I'm taking a photo, and one of the guys working with us, they're like somewhere else looking at, trying to find the oldest headstone and stuff. And I hear one guy go, "You better get the hell out of there." And I'm like taking pictures. I'm like, so the second picture I took, I didn't see mommy in the first one. So I guess I got a little too close to the baby when I was taking the photos. And mommy stood up and started walking, and I was like, just slowly back away.
Yeah.
So I was safe. I
You're a menace.
didn't get charged. I know. Isla does not like me. I've been there twice. I missed the ferry both times. So this is, if you guys follow Kilchoman, they do Comrite release. It's only goes to bars and restaurants that support Kilchoman. In 8 states, I have 1 account that gets it. But these are Comrite stones. There was 3 of them set around the church, and it kind of marks the border of the church's property. So back in the day when you were being chased by the Vikings, if you could make it to the church, they would give you sanctuaries, feed you, protect you. So these stones are still there, hundreds of years old, and it's really cool to see. You can see the crosses still on them. So a lot of fun to see those. And this is Kilchoman's boat when you guys pull into Port Ellen. If you ever want to take a boat out, I'm sure they won't mind. Spirit of Isla.
Sure, go for it.
I've been told when the ferry doesn't go, they sometimes pick up visitors from the mainland,
Really?
but I don't know if that's true or not.
That's a decent journey.
It is, but on that boat, it's probably like a third of the time that the ferry takes, so.
Oh, nice.
But yep, so they got a boat.
Photos on Isla.
There's a reason that I fall down in barley and make angels. You just kind of tag back. And actually, I do this quite a bit. So when we're there, like I specifically take photos that I can use to show people. This cask pops all around Kilchoman. I've seen it in 2 different places. I've been there twice. It's been in a different place both times. They just released a 16-year-old. It will be landing in the country sometime shortly. There will be some available. We got actually more than I was expecting.
I'm pretty sure it's here in New York already.
Is it?
Yeah, they're very allocated. Because I think Nine Maple, our bar here, got it.
Okay. My distributors have it ordered. I don't know that it's left yet, though. It's not a single cask, it's their release? Huh, okay. So December 14th, 2005, the first barrel they ever filled. So John McClellan, who was their first or second distillery manager, he was at Bunnahabhain for 30 years. He passed away. They took 1 bottle out of this, they hand dipped, filled up 1 bottle out of this cask, put it up for auction. Money went to charity for the place that was taking care of him. And towards the end of his life with his cancer, $10,000 for 1 bottle of Kilchoman out of there. So in 2005, they only filled 7 casks. So technically, if you see a Kilchoman from 2005, it is probably their first run or 2 that they ever did. And then 2006 was their first full year of filling casks. We're now in 2023 and we're getting a 16-year-old. So that is definitely some of the oldest casks that they had in their warehouses that they put together for this bottling. I'm excited to try it. We were talking, I love young Isla whiskeys. The older they get, to me, they tend to mellow out a little bit. They lose some of their peat and smoke flavors. When I drink Isla whiskey, I want it to be punchy and bright and real aggressive on the palate. So I tend to prefer the younger, under 10-year-old Isla whiskeys. And then here's just some advice for you guys. I always leave people with advice. So you have been an awesome audience tonight. Thank you very much. This is where the responsible part for us ends, and I'm gonna go to the hotel and have some beers. I know that, but so all right. It's just like kids, you can only have one favorite, except you have to admit it tonight. So whose favorite was Wolfburn? Anybody? Got a couple back there. All right, all right.
Were you guys at the tasting a couple months ago when we did that? Oh, there you go.
My house next to it.
Nice.
Lochlea Our Barley.
I love Lochlea.
It's one of my
There
everyday
were just some
drinkers.
really
Yeah,
incredible whiskeys.
that's what's hard about it. Yeah. The Teaninich from Adelphi.
Nice.
I can't vote twice.
No.
I'll wait there.
The Benriach. All right. Kilchoman PX. I know we got a couple. And then the single cask Kilchoman at the end. It's my favorite as well. That's a pretty even spread.
Yeah, pretty good.
Nice. So does anyone have any questions or anything else that they want? Doesn't have to be about these whiskeys. You guys are pretty spoiled that you have her here to take you through a lot of stuff, and both you guys know quite a bit more than most shop owners that I've come in touch with. So these guys are pretty spoiled. You guys don't realize how nice you have it that you can walk in and ask a question and actually get an answer. Doesn't happen in a lot of shops. So
Correct answer.
well, true, a correct answer.
Or if not correct, we'll try and find out.
Yeah. Well, that's your job to figure out what's the truth and what's not. They just need to answer it. Yes.
One question, Jared. So I can't read the logos around the island.
Yes.
Can you say which ones are Wolf? Are any of these like these?
So Wolfburn's not on there, but it's way up here. All right. Northernmost distillery on the mainland. Okay. Lochlea has a feather.
Yeah, so just a quick, while he's answering that question. The last whiskey, the 12-year-old last whiskey, that's gone. But there is one left of the Benriach, one left of the Teaninich, or two Teaninich.
Is that what's in there, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have Lochlea and Wolfburn and the
On your
PX.
sheet there?
We still have 3 PX Kilchoman, so.
Yeah, but
What's that?
Also barley.
4, yeah. So just so you
Other
know,
things I do as well, which we won't
but
discuss.
really quickly, Jared,
Sorry.
for the people online, because I'm gonna close them out, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This was awesome. For us as a shop, Impex is like one of those premier portfolios that we like drool over all the time, and try to connect with, and I'm so glad that you came up all the way from Delaware. This is a pretty big trip. They don't come up to upstate too often, so really happy and appreciative of both Jared and I keep forgetting your name. Gerson, who will be our kind of new New York rep for Impex. So we welcome Gerson. Yeah, awesome. Really great stuff. I mean, they do other brands, Glenallachie, which we really love. Glenallachie, we're big fans of Glenallachie, and lots of other things too. Impex is like some of the best brands that we work with. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
This was really
thanks for
awesome.
having me. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah.
That was great.
So I hope you all enjoyed tonight. I know we had a really packed house tonight, but I think we did really well. And yeah, so there you go.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
See you guys.